Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
So glad you're with us for the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Jim Garrity is back. And Jim, it's been so long since we've talked. We have a whole new president and everything.
Actually, this is a rerun. The show's, Trump is president. Did Ohio State win the presidency, win the national championship while Trump was president?
No,
Probably
thankfully.
not.
2014 was their previous
So that's
one.
how we know this is new. And I figured a guy from Michigan would have that information at his fingertips.
Yes. Yeah, yesterday was my Iran-Iraq war of college football. Michigan fans despise Ohio State and Notre Dame. We don't play Notre Dame every year anymore, but for those of us old enough, the animosity is still there. The best news of yesterday, away from politics, was that the Bears actually seem to have won the Ben Johnson sweepstakes. We'll see if that's actually confirmed.
But just, we'll get off college football in a second, listeners. But I should point out that was the worst loss for Notre Dame since they lost to USC on Christmas Eve in 1988.
Yeah, that was actually a major continuity error in Die Hard because regular season college football on Christmas Eve, come on, you're well into the bowl season by that point, and neither of those schools were playing on Christmas Eve in their bowl game very often, and certainly not against each other.
The whole idea of the tidy bowl, toilet bowl, and all these other, bowls didn't come along till later on. So you can't, now it's traditional pretty much from like Thanksgiving to New Year's. You've got companies you've never heard of. Pop-Tart Bowl is awesome, but otherwise, So, yeah, it's a little before then, but maybe this is taking place in an alternate universe where both Notre Dame is at USC, right?
Yeah.
They're both pretty good, but not great. And they got stuck in the Christmas Eve, bowl game.
Yes, but the problem with
Sponsored by Nakatomi Corporation.
Notre Dame actually won the national championship that year. They played in the Fiesta Bowl, but when you're making the movie, you can't assume that's going to happen. But okay, enough football. Let's get on to the politics and where we stand. Yesterday was a blizzard of activity for the new president, the once again President Donald Trump, signing a ton of executive orders. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the second martini. Hit, I think, all three inaugural balls last night. But one of the things that happened while he was signing all those executive orders was that the first of his cabinet nominees was confirmed. The vote was 99-0, and that's for Marco Rubio to be Secretary of State. I assume he's going to be sworn in very soon if he hasn't been by the time you hear this. The vote 99-0. The only reason it wasn't 100-0 is because Ohio still didn't have a senator. But that will be rectified today as well with John Husted being sworn in. And so, Jim, we also got cabinet members moved from committee to a final floor vote, including Pete Hegseth for defense, John Ratcliffe for CIA, and Kristi Noem for DHS. More hearings are happening as we speak. And so it looks as though, and you were referring to this earlier today, that at the moment there's a shot that Trump's going to get every one of these cabinet picks across the finish line. I know Lindsey Graham officially came out and said he's a no on RFK Jr. for HHS. So that one may still be up in the air, but I would imagine there's a few Democrats that might actually want him at HHS. So that could counteract any Republican hesitancy there. But what do you make of what we're seeing now with momentum, big time momentum, it seems, on the cabinet front?
Yeah, so I'm tuning in for the inauguration yesterday, and Jake Tapper was anchoring it, and they're doing a voiceover as they show you this, the crowds, and they're mentioned that all the cabinet officials are there. And Tapper observed that at this point he hasn't heard any reports that any of them are expected to go down. There are 53 Republican senators. Well, there will be once we get everybody sworn in the way they should be. Republican defections have been few and far between. Fetterman has indicated some support for some of them. So you're probably going to have confirmation for all, which is not the tone you would have expected when a bunch of these folks were named. And I remember, last year, meaning in December, doing a chat with two of my colleagues from the Washington Post, left of center columnists, and I said, if you had a magic wand and you could stop one cabinet nominee from being confirmed, which one would it be? And neither one of them liked the premise of the question. They couldn't prioritize. They thought a whole bunch of them were bad. And I was like, well, the point of the exercise was to say, if you were Senate Democrats and you really wanted to stop Hegseth, then you had to concentrate all your firepower, metaphorically, and make the case and try to focus on making an argument that would persuade Republican senators not to vote, not to, please progressives and all that. As the conversation on CNN continued, they said, well, maybe Gabbard's in trouble. I've noticed that she completely flipped on domestic surveillance. So she'll be hunky-dory. She's perfectly fine for DNI. Never mind. Emily Latella has, and I think RFK Jr. is probably going to have the most objections from Republicans. But as you noted, there could be Democrats who come along with that. So other than those two, like Ratcliffe might get confirmed unanimously. And just kind of this sense of Hegseth's out of committee. Trump's pretty much going to get the cabinet he wants to get, and that is our good Martini. And I think it is a demonstration that Democrats still aren't used to being in the minority and still aren't used to trying to make an argument that will persuade potentially persuadable Republican senators, which if they don't learn, Trump's going to get a whole lot of what he wants through this Senate. And, I'm reminded of way back in the day, I used to work my first job out of college was working for Capitol Steps. And we had a guy named Bill Strauss who did spoonerisms. And he kind of flip around the letters and it makes something sound very funny. And one of his recurring, catchphrases was "low slurners," which is probably a good way of just describing Senate Republicans, Senate Democrats these days.
Exactly, yeah. Capitol Steps were awesome. Yeah, they whipped their flirts. So
that's right. There you go.
So it looks like the bulk of Trump's cabinet picks are headed for confirmation. There's a couple that I wouldn't mind seeing fall by the wayside, HHS and labor in particular. But it seems like every president has at least one nominee that they don't get. And for Trump, that's already Matt Gaetz at Justice, which still may have been just a favor to Matt Gaetz to give him an excuse to resign and avoid potentially the House ethics report, which didn't work because he was more than happy to have someone else ready to go the second Matt Gaetz stepped away. But, Tom Daschle didn't make it with Obama, and Linda Chavez for Bush, and Lonnie Guinier for Clinton, and John Tower for Bush 41. So there's usually at least one, and we'll see if there's more than one. But so far, right now, it looks like the ones who are currently nominated.
Greg, am I remembering correctly that under Obama, the Secretary of Commerce job had an old gypsy curse on it that everybody who get nominated for that kept? Bill Richardson, there were like several he had gone through. Oh, yeah. And apparently none of them paid taxes. None of them had, all of their nannies were illegal. And it was just whatever. If you said, yes, Mr. President, I will find that, I'll do the job. Every skeleton of your closet came out simultaneously. And it was like, nope. So.
Exactly. And the only guy with tax problems that got confirmed, Secretary of the Treasury.
Tim Geithner. Yeah.
He's
TurboTax led him astray.
Uniquely qualified. Can't possibly go forward without Tim Geithner.
Person leading the questioning on that, Charlie Rangel, who also didn't pay taxes.
Oh, Washington. You got to love it. If there wasn't hypocrisy, they'd have nothing to talk about. All right, Jim, as mentioned, there were a lot of executive actions taken yesterday by President Trump. I think for the most part, if looking at the sheer volume of executive orders, we would agree with a lot of them, especially as it relates to the border, to energy, rolling back DEI policies, free speech policies. Some people may not love the return to work policy for the federal government. My commute might get a little thicker, but a lot of other people say your productivity is going to go up. Your mileage may vary. I think I work better at home, actually, and I know you work from home. Then there's also executive actions to put people over fish when it comes to water in California. That's obviously related to the fires, death penalty. On and on it goes, revoking clearances for the 51 people who signed the letter saying that the Hunter Biden laptop story was Russian disinformation. And then he slapped John Bolton on top of that, too, which is not a huge surprise. But then there are other ones that are more controversial, withdrawing from the WHO, which a lot of people might like, birthright citizenship, which you write about today in the Morning Jolt. And then there's the one that's getting the most raised eyebrows, raised blood pressures in some cases, and that is the pardoning, for the most part, a few commutations for everyone convicted related to the protests that turned into riots on January 6, 2021. And so this is not what a lot of people had expected, and that would appear to include the current and new vice president of the United States. Here's J.D. Vance just 2 Sundays ago talking to Shannon Bream on Fox News Sunday about this.
January 6th pardons, President Trump says there's a process. Where is the line drawn on who will and wouldn't be considered for a pardon?
I think it's very simple. Look, if you protested peacefully on January the 6th and you've had Merrick Garland's Department of Justice treat you like a gang member, you should be pardoned. If you committed violence on that day, obviously you shouldn't be pardoned. And there's a little bit of a gray area there, but we're very much committed to seeing the equal administration of law. And there are a lot of people, we think, in the wake of January the 6th who were prosecuted unfairly. We need to rectify that.
And so, Jim, that's kind of where I've been largely on the January 6th protesters. A lot of people are saying, well, after Biden's pardons, which we'll talk about more in the final Martini, Trump certainly has as much latitude as he wants on this particular issue. Others like Kurt Schlichter, who's a big pro-Trump guy, writes for the Town Hall, is saying that Trump did the right thing here. He says the issue is not what they substantively did or did not do. The issue is that there's a two-track justice system where leftist-affiliated potential defendants are either not charged or are prosecuted to a much lesser extent. Moreover, the DOJ has shown bias and malice. It has overcharged and hidden evidence as well as coerced pleas. The judges have shown outrageous bias and so forth. So he says the process of prosecuting all of these people has been corrupt, so therefore they all ought to be pardoned. So I know your colleague Dan McLaughlin has written that pardoning the violent ones is the wrong take. I believe that's your take as well. What do you make of what Trump did here and the arguments backing him up?
Yeah, I love Kurt, and I get why he feels the way he does. And the Biden Justice Department's lack of interest in prosecuting anyone for any crime that occurred during the George Floyd protests turned riots is, inexcusable. I don't think two wrongs make a right, and I don't think we should say, well, those folks assaulted police officers and didn't have their. Therefore, we're just going to say it's okay for these folks to prosecute police officers. Tell you what, if somebody comes along and just punches a police officer today, but they just do it because they're a psycho, they just do it because they're mentally ill or because they're antisocial or something like that, but they don't do it in the context of defending President Trump and insisting he won the 2020 election, are we going to prosecute that one? So basically, as long as you're doing it for political motivations, then it's hunky-dory. But if you do it for just any old willy-nilly, then all of a sudden it's a real crime and it has to be prosecuted. The Vance answer is correct. This is what the president's pardon power is for, although I'll have more thoughts that I'll share on that in the next Martini. I'm willing to believe that some people were over-prosecuted or that there were some people who paid enough a sentence and deserve a commutation or something like that. But the idea of we're just going to do it in a sweeping sense is infuriating. I discussed this with a couple of my Washington Post colleagues earlier this morning, and I did point out, much to their consternation, you could say this is an outrage of justice. I would also point out that a country that is really all that upset about January 6th does not return Donald Trump to the Oval Office, but they did. The verdict has been rendered by the public. Now, I argue that was a wrong verdict, or in the sense that you cannot, wave away what occurred on January 6th, but I don't expect there to be significant fallout from this. The country has moved on, and that may be an appropriate response for some folks who had nonviolent offenses and were trespassed or things like that. But in the end, there were some folks out there who were hitting cops and out there to cause as much chaos as they could, and that warranted legal consequences, and the president has done a grave injustice by saying, yeah, you're all out, never mind, no consequences.
Yeah, so there's already plenty of consternation, but as we said, and we'll get to in the Crazy Martini here in just a moment, yesterday was a day for a lot of talk about pardons and commutations. And so we'll see where it goes from here, but I think a lot of people were surprised. I don't know if J.D. Vance just wasn't on the same page as Trump, disagreed with Trump, wasn't aware of what Trump was planning to do on this particular issue, but it's kind of surprising that the incoming administration had that message as recently as 10 days ago, and then obviously a different course of action yesterday. All right, well, let's talk about BetterHelp. 2025, we're now exactly 3 weeks in, and I think, Quitter's Day is 2 weeks into the new year. So how's this new year going for you? Are some of the changes you tried to make already sticking? Have you already given up on them? Do you feel like you're in a rut, or are you in a pretty good place? Well, if things aren't going the way you want to, and you've tried to steer them in a better direction, but it's just not working, maybe you need some extra help. And that's where BetterHelp comes in. When you think about where you want to be at the end of 2025, maybe BetterHelp's the way to help you get there.
BetterHelp is fully online. It makes therapy affordable and convenient and serves more than 5 million people worldwide. You can access a diverse network of more than 30,000 credentialed therapists with a wide range of specialties. And you can easily switch therapists anytime at no extra cost.
So write your story with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/3ML to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/3ML. All right, Jim, on to our Crazy Martini now. And John Gabriel and I talked about this to some extent yesterday, although there was one other commutation issued by President Biden on Monday that we did not get to because I didn't know about it. And that's that FBI killer Leonard Peltier killed 2 FBI agents for some reason commuted by Joe Biden. But that wasn't all. Of course, as we mentioned yesterday, he preemptively pardoned the entire January 6th commission, General Mark Milley, Dr. Anthony Fauci, and 5 more members of his own family, including 2 brothers, a sister, and the spouses of 2 of them. So, Jim, you actually joked on Twitter when the preemptive pardons for J6, Milley, and Fauci came out that one of Biden's brothers was looking around like John Travolta in Pulp Fiction, like, where's my pardon? And then I think Biden was literally sitting down in the Capitol Rotunda when the announcement came out that, yes, in fact, the preemptive pardons were coming for his family as well. So that makes 6 for his family when you include Hunter Biden. And so Joe Biden going about as ugly as possible. And so you and others have talked about either changing the way pardons are done or maybe not allowing it during the lame duck session. That would obviously take some sort of congressional authorization, at least, if not constitutional amendment authorization. So what do you make of what we saw yesterday and just the way Biden is going out?
You know, when our founders set up the Constitution, the pardon power is the one area where they said to the head of the executive branch, everywhere else we got checks and balances. Everywhere else we've got something where your power is limited. This is the one area where we're going to give you a lot of power. The only restriction is norms and standards and traditions. So just don't go crazy with it. That took a real bad hit yesterday, both between the Trump pardons we discussed in the previous Martini and particularly over Biden's behavior of the last couple of weeks, not just what he did literally, almost literally the last minute of his presidency. But we could go back to Mark Rich. We could go back to this bipartisan tradition of last-minute pardons that are pretty shameless, and that one of the ideas I tossed around it actually came from a letter writer to the Wall Street Journal, who said that the pardon power should be rescinded between Election Day and Inauguration Day. The idea being that you can pardon whoever you want, but either you as a president or some representative of your party will face the voters and will suffer any consequences for a very controversial or unpopular pardon. Now, again, I think it probably would take a constitutional amendment there. But really, almost everything yesterday was a bad idea. First of all, regarding these preemptive blanket pardons that basically are like, whatever crimes you committed, you cannot be prosecuted for from this date to that date. Look, even if it didn't happen in this case, and I think my colleague Noah Rothman is absolutely correct, that Fauci had better get his butt in front of Congress right now and say everything, because he can't be prosecuted for perjury or anything like that. But then the idea, at some point, some future president is going to, put out these blanket, no restrictions, anything they've done, going back for as long as it needs to, pardons. And the official is going to come out and say, well, I'm greatly relieved. I thank the president. And by the way, I was a Zodiac killer.
Ted Cruz will breathe a big sigh of relief.
Right. I mean, and his dad for the assassinating JFK. Can you believe, I'm saying somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but I've heard the argument that, wait a minute, can you even get a pardon when you haven't been charged with a crime, never mind convicted with one? And this just feels like almost literally a get-out-of-jail-free card from Monopoly, and it just seems like a very bad idea. I thought, we'd have enough good judgment in our presidents that we wouldn't have to change the Constitution's pardon power, but I feel like the evidence for this is adding up. Leonard, is Peltier or is it Peltier? I believe it's Peltier because the silent R is for righteousness. You don't pronounce it because he has none. But anyway, God killed 2 FBI agents. And this has been a cause, I'm going to say the left, but I mean really the fringe left wing who believe that there was something righteous in the way. This was a Native American activist and all that stuff. And, this was right up there with Mumia. I'm dating, probably half our listeners oh, I remember that, Again, Biden did it on the way out the door, and you kind of wonder how with it is Biden these days. How aware is he? According to that Mike Johnson example, he didn't remember signing an executive order restricting liquid natural gas exports. And did Biden think about that? Remember when Biden was tough on crime? And now we're going to commute the sentence and have now, Peltier's 80. It's not like we expect him to go out and do more, but nonetheless, it basically is like he's been popping out pardons and commutations like a Pez dispenser for that. And some people say, oh, well, it's nonviolent drug offenses. Yeah, in a lot of these cases, they pled down to nonviolent drug offenses. It's not that the crimes they committed were nonviolent. It just meant we didn't, that was a way of avoiding a trial. And now they're out on at home release or other things. So Really just a terrible day for pardon power yesterday. And Peltier, the president's family. Look, if the way you know Joe Biden was ashamed to issue this pardon to his family members is that if he hadn't been ashamed, he wouldn't have waited until almost literally the last minute to do it.
No, exactly right. Never had to take a question about it, obviously, because he was already at the ceremony and was the ex-president by the time it came out. There may be, if he ever shows up in public again, he might get a question or two about it. But the vapors are much higher from the media for Trump. See if you can notice the difference here. This isn't about Trump's pardons yesterday. This is about pardons Trump did at the end of his first term. This is Maggie Hagerman and Michael Schmidt at the New York Times. President Trump doled out clemency to a new group of loyalists on Wednesday, wiping away convictions and sentences as he aggressively employed his power to override courts, juries, and prosecutors to apply his own standard of justice for his allies. Now, yesterday, Peter Baker, New York Times, President Biden moved just hours before leaving office on Monday to guard some of President-elect Donald J. Trump's most high-profile adversaries against a promised campaign of retribution by issuing preemptive pardons to head off politically driven prosecutions. Now, if you squint, if you really squint, you can see the differences here, but it's just unbelievable. And you're totally right. Biden's got 8,000 plus pardons and 6,000. Some of them are drug offenders. But as Andy McCarthy loves to say, most people who end up in prison for a long time, unless it's a murder or something, it's a lifetime achievement award because you've usually been given multiple chances to clean up your act by not spending a lot of time in prison. And if you're serving a long sentence, chances are you've got a really long rap sheet. And there's, like you said, a good chance that they pled down from some of the more violent charges. So we're going to miss making fun of Joe Biden. We're not going to miss him as president. And kind of like we said yesterday, when it comes to Trump, there's obviously more things we're going to like. There's going to be some things we don't like, and we'll ride the roller coaster all the way. And so we'll see what happens next.
Greg, it's a whole new era and the end of an era. Well, either one will do.
So there you go. Major transportation announcement, infrastructure announcement. Very first week is infrastructure week. We'll see how it goes. So Jim,
get ready, America. We're extending I-95 to Greenland. And a new bridge connecting Florida and Texas across the Gulf of America.
Yes, did you see DeSantis with the weather warning that the storm was coming out of the Gulf of America? It's happening, people. It's happening. All right, Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Please subscribe to the podcast if you don't already. Tell your friends about us as well. Thanks for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please catch us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a great Tuesday, and please join us again on Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.